Are we recording again on the web conference? Okay, great. So in the second part of our session, we're going to see BPM in action in a number of different forms. From a discovery, from an implementation, and from an optimization standpoint. So we're going to be using a couple of different things to do this. One of them is BlueWorks Live on the left. And at blueworkslive.com, you can get to the environment that I'll be using for the first part of the demonstration. For the second half of the demonstration, I'll be using IBM Business Process Manager. And as Neil described, that is a culmination of our proven Lombardi capabilities in business-focused business process development and web server process server capabilities in that middleware integration segment. So the best of all worlds. So we'll be using what I call the modeling for documentation part of the equation in the first half of the demonstration. So we do modeling for documentation primarily. Neil indicated that there are some simple process automation capabilities in BlueWorks Live, and I'll cover those. So that, as Neil explained, if you model a business process and decide that based on your understanding of that business process, you would like to manage it a little bit better, but you either don't have time right now or don't have budget right now, or you feel that the process isn't sophisticated enough to warrant a full-blown BPM platform on the right half of the screen, you can do some simple process automation in the cloud with BlueWorks Live. We'll highlight that a little bit. And for full-blown business process management, where on the right half we want to model for execution, in other words, take that picture of the process on the left and actually make it runnable as a business process application, we'll use these tools to do that. Yes, question? Yeah, so the question is, do we have an option for customers that haven't gone to the cloud yet? Yes, we do. So in the right half of the picture, we have tools that you can use inside of your firewall on your company intranet without going to the cloud to do process modeling for documentation as well as process modeling for execution to do the whole thing. It's very similar to what's on the left. So then it becomes a question of would you like to leverage that in the cloud? So let me mention one other thing. So one thing we do with this solution on the left, this process modeling for documentation primarily in BlueWorks Live, is because it's a cloud-based environment, since we launched it in 2007, we have a rhythm that we've gotten into where every 6 to 8 weeks we enhance it. So essentially we have a release every 6 to 8 weeks because of the fact that it's based in the cloud. It makes it easy for us to incrementally update it, keeping the end user experience consistent so you don't have to learn new things, but releasing capabilities based upon customer feedback that make it even better, right? So it's part of the benefit of using it in the cloud, and even ranging from the various industries, from finance to government, that have very strict, regulations, that we found that based on the way we've secured it, that even the most stringent customers that are reluctant to do things in the cloud embrace it. But yeah. So what about people that don't go here? So I have some great examples of how the tooling works to pull the people into the fold that won't go to this site. So you have your problem children, or the people that no matter how much you try to entice them with, this is a great environment that's zero learning curve and easy to use, they still won't go to it, right? So what we do is we create very simple business-friendly documentation based on everything you do in there to share with those people that don't log on to the site. So C-level execs, VPs, directors, as well as business stakeholders. Yeah. Yeah, and so if you want to use the BlueWorks Live capabilities inside your company without going to the cloud, that was the first answer I gave you, which is we have modeling tools that you can use, and the BlueWorks Live environment while it's currently exclusively available in the cloud, is being enhanced over time to offer, for instance, private cloud offerings. So one of the things that we're planning on doing in the relatively near future, and I'm not pre-announcing any products, right? But our part of our focus in the roadmap of what we're doing in the cloud is to make it available for customers both in the cloud as well as in the private cloud, and so that customers can use it in their own environment and not have to worry about it being on the internet, right? So that's something that we haven't announced or released, right? But something that we're looking at very seriously and hope to have at some point.
I just wanted to ask the question. Can you say why it's so adamantly not in the cloud? Oh, okay. Well, yeah. I mean, we've run into that situation before, and oftentimes we can, through a reasoned argument, at least open up that door a little crack, because it makes a whole lot of sense. And your CIO is not the first one to suggest that. Like FAA, for example, is one of our customers. Like I mentioned Citigroup a number of times. We have 200,000, I believe, users of this software now in the cloud. So through that exercise, there's been a lot of CIOs like your own that said, no way, there's no way, and it's typically a security concern, that they want to control the infrastructure, right? And they're nervous about anything that has any proprietary information that is not within their four walls. And that's typically what it is. But I'm saying that the reason I asked the question is that we haven't countered that before, and we can counter that because the value of it is so high, and once we can determine what the actual objection is, rather than just, nope, I'm not going to go there, which is hard to argue against, we can sometimes change those around. So, I mean, it'd be interesting to see
and what we've seen since 2007 is in the majority of the cases, they've changed their mind. And so what we realize is that we can't change everyone's mind, so we're pursuing making this available in the private cloud as well. Thanks for asking that question. So let's go ahead and take a look at what BlueWorks Live consists of. In BlueWorks Live, first of all, when you go to blueworkslive.com, you get to a landing page that looks like this. And on this landing page at blueworkslive.com, you can sign up for a free trial, a free 90-day trial, and start using it immediately. The resources page on blueworkslive.com has a number of resources for you, so that while you can begin using this with almost no learning curve, we have online training courses which are live recorded tutorial demos done by, for instance, Bruce Silver, who's a thought leader in the BPM space, and his team that really show you soup to nuts everything that is possible on BlueWorks Live. So if you're a casual experimenter, you can sign up and just start using it based on what you see today. If you want a weekly demo, there's a weekly demo you can sign up for that happens every week on Tuesdays. And if you're someone that likes to read the owner's manual before you start using the electronic device, we accommodate those folks as well because we have these exhaustive online training courses as well. So we try to accommodate everyone's style of adoption and learning. So in BlueWorks Live, we can do a number of things. First of all, we can blueprint a process. So in BlueWorks Live, whether you go to the main page or you go to, like in this case, My Personal Space, you can blueprint a process, and that's just the phrase we give to modeling a process. Let's create a blueprint of what the process consists of. So let's create one that is our Chicago hiring process. So let's go ahead and create the Chicago hiring process. And in here, what we see is we see a discovery map. So in the discovery map, this is a simple way to have a business discussion about what the process is made up of. So imagine that you're facilitating or participating in a 2-hour morning session where you've got the process, some of the process stakeholders in the room. Much like today, we have a handful of IT professionals and a handful of business professionals, and these folks understand something about the process. So we might shout out, tell us a little bit about the process. Like for instance, in the case of a hiring process, we need to we need to recruit new talent, right? What are some other things that we do when when we're onboarding new folks, if we have to fill a new position, what do you need to do when you fill a new position? You've got an opening on your team. Somebody shout out. Okay, get a new computer. Okay, what else? Can you speak up? I'm sorry. Job, position, requirements, pay scale, account access, sorry, number of positions, physical locations. What about something on the very front end? Who do we work with to find new talent? Okay, what do we do? Who hires them? Who's responsible for making the offer? Right? We have to make. Sorry. Okay, so human resources, sign off, that sort of a thing. So we've got a number of activities we've built up here, and in this process, there are a number of steps. Right? There's sort of the recruiting step or milestone. Right? Once we go through some recruiting, we go through the kind of the offer stage. In addition to the offer stage, maybe we have a onboarding, and then once we go through the onboarding, maybe there's another training. But you get the idea that we've got fundamental milestones in this process. So let's look at the get a new computer. Would the get a new computer fall in the recruiting, offer stage, or onboarding? Onboarding. So job position requirements, is that in recruiting, offer stage, or onboarding? Okay. What about pay scale? Where do we decide about that? Is that when we're making the offer or recruiting? Offer. Okay. Account access, that's probably over here in onboarding. Number of positions, that probably belongs in recruiting, right? That's probably really something way up front. Maybe job position requirement is way up front. Physical locations, that's probably onboarding. Recruiter team. Maybe recruiter team is actually a role that describes who performs these activities. Maybe we'll find that out in a minute. Make the offer. When does make the offer happen? I guess in the offer stage, right? And then human resource sign-off. It's probably in the middle here, right? Because we need sign-off in order to hire the person. Maybe in some companies, the human resources sign-off happens before we even spend money on recruiting. Maybe it happens in both places, right? You get the idea here that what we're doing is we're having a discussion about what are the primary activities involved in a hiring process. And what you see purposely missing from this discovery map, this Cadillac board up here of the activities is where are the arrows and the lines and the decision gateway diamonds. And, pretty soon before you know it, whoever said human resources sign off, when we sort of, when we slow down and add new activities to this discovery map and this morning session with the business IT stakeholders, that person has got that sort of burning understanding, has that tribal knowledge, understands more about the human resources sign-off than maybe some of the rest of us. You say, that human resources sign-off, that's a challenge. There are a lot of problems with that. If this happens, then that happens. We have all these business exceptions and challenges that happen with it. And if that person speaks up when we're first in that first stage of putting activities on the board and say, you know what, we are really interested in what you have to say, just hold that thought. Let's come to consensus on kind of the critical mass of high-level activities. We're going to come back to you for that. So capture that, write it down if you need to. We're going to come back to you. So once we get the critical mass of these activities up on this clean discovery map, right, that doesn't have analysis, paralysis, clutter of connections and decision gateway diamonds, no if-then-else details, not even any exceptions or challenges or problems, right? We want to get a good critical mass of the activities. Once we're there, now what's next? What's next is we can drill down into any one of these activities just by double-clicking on it and say, well, who are the participants and the business owners? So, for instance, the business owners that care that this gets done properly let me just take a quick look down here. Who performs this role? The human resources. Who are the experts that and you see that we get some pop-up help here that shows us that if someone is typing in a role name that has been used before, I get kind of type-ahead help. And this isn't just a web browser type-ahead help. This is actually a business glossary that's being kept recorded dynamically as people are using this. Well, what if there are multiple business owners that care about this step getting done right? We can have another business owner, maybe not only human resources, but the line of business, right? Cares about that, or another business stakeholder might be the hiring manager, right? And who do we turn to if we have challenges getting this activity done properly? There might be some experts, an expert role that we turn to if we have challenges or if we need to train new people in this activity. Are there any systems involved? Maybe there's an HR portal, right? What about how long does it take? Well, the human resources sign up, I mean, today it takes 3 days. I don't understand why it takes 3 days, but it takes 3 days. And that's very costly because time is money. I mean, I don't know how much that is. Maybe we'll come back to that. In other cases on activities, we know exactly how much it costs. So maybe we'll just put a placeholder here of $1,000. What about the inputs and outputs? What's the title on the document, either the physical or virtual document, that comes onto your physical or virtual desktop when you begin this activity? Well, in this case, it's probably the resume, right? What else might we need for human resources sign-off besides the resume? Sorry? Dependency? What? Yep, okay. And then background. Oh, background check. How about background check results? Oh, I just realized that that's a whole other activity, isn't it? So let's go up here and add an activity, background check. And you know what, that background check, that's actually fairly complicated. We might actually convert this to a sub-process and blow it out into more detail, right? Maybe or maybe just in simple format, maybe this background check, it really consists of some sort of drug screen, criminal background. Maybe I have a progressive CIO or CEO, and they demand that there's some sort of a Facebook check. Hey, let's make sure that this person doesn't just talk a good game, but they actually walk the talk, right? I mean, there could be all sorts of things. And you see how this background check turns into a dotted line here? So I keep this high-level discovery map clean. That's the high-level activity. But if I drill down into this set of activities, we can see that background check actually has a number of sub-process activities to it. So we were able to capture multiple levels of detail without cluttering up the simple business view of the high-level set of activities, right? Okay, so we can go through these and time box this, right? Maybe we're doing this half-hour session, and we say, okay, we're going to spend the next 30 minutes trying to fill out some of these sheets. The people responsibilities, the roles, the systems, the time, the cost. It's also really important, not only the inputs and outputs. The outputs of this is, I guess, HR sign-off or something else like that. We might capture details about the customer stakeholders. Is this risky? This is, maybe we consider this to be high risk, because if human resources sign-off is done improperly, then it's going to be really costly to fire that person if we don't hire the quality people. And what's the value add of this? Well, I guess some people might claim that the value add of the human resources sign-off is none. It's either there's no value add or it's just required. So then when we analyze all the activities and look at things like value add and do things like Lean and Six Sigma and Muda, for those enthusiasts that are maybe have green belt, black belt, Six Sigma people on your teams, they're real interested in, well, is it a value add activity? Because if it's not, we better really work hard at containing the cost, right? So now this is the point at which we say, okay, let's revisit some of those experts, get some of that tribal knowledge out of the team about what problems and challenges occur. Maybe there's a re-entry of data for this human resources sign-off, and that that happens all the time. The frequency for that is high. Maybe also for some of these activities, there's high error rates. Really, whatever the experts say in the room about the challenges, this is where we go back to. It's like, hey, you sounded like you knew a lot about human resources sign-off. Can you tell us some of the challenges about that? Let's capture it right here, and then we can build out this problem or challenges sheet. We can put in some documentation, some simple documentation here about, this is a high-level description of how this activity works, and then so on and so forth with rich text editing. What about documents? You know what? This probably isn't the first time we've thought about this process. Who has some documents about it? Oh, you've got some Word documents. You've been doing some Visio diagramming. Somebody in the back has been giving presentations about this for the last year because we're hemorrhaging, an inefficiency, and it's costing us a lot, and it's taken way too long. Didn't you say you gave a presentation to the line of business director about this? Yeah, let's attach that, right? So we can collect in a single place all the documents that people have, been using to describe this process. And so in here we can add a bunch of attachments. Now, here's a transition point. Yeah, question? Yep. So and then when somebody clicks on that link in the process, we can have it replace the current window or pop up in a new window because we don't want to lose focus on what they're doing to look at the process. So we can absolutely link to information. And I haven't tried that in the attachments page, but we can certainly do that in the documentation page. So thank you for asking that question. So now here's a transition point. We've time-boxed this. We spent a couple of hours getting the activities up on the Cadillac board on this discovery map, bless you. And then we've sort of taught people a little bit of how you might use this to capture the collective knowledge about the process. But we time-boxed it. I mean, it's 2 hours later and people have other things to do. Okay, so I'm going to give you some homework to do. The scales, okay? What we've been doing since 2007 is going into customers, hosting a little session, and then saying, okay, you have some homework to do. I'm going to press, it's hard to see on this board up here, but on the web conference you can see it clearly. On the bottom of the screen, there's a Invite New Users button. And this Invite New Users button makes it very easy to invite new users to the BlueWorks Live account. When I click this, if I'm inviting for everybody in this room, I can type in whatever their email is, and I can choose whether they're an editor and they can create and change things, or if they're just a contributor, they can only review and comment. So I'm going to give you all homework to do. We're going to reconvene in about 4 to 5 days, and I want everybody to log on to this account because you just got an email that links you to this, and lo and behold, when we come back in 4 to 5 days, when the meeting is reconvened, it looks something like this. It's a bigger discovery map. People discover that they can colorize things. People like colors. Color coding's good. And when we visit the details of these activities, we see things like this. We see that people have filled out more details about who performs the activity and what the inputs and outputs are. They filled in problem descriptions, added some documentation. People have attached documents like Excel and PDFs and Visio and Word and PowerPoint. We can easily see what they are and drill down into them and look at them. And you know what? At this point, as we've reconvened 4 to 5 business days from now and we see that there's more detail in the process, we might tweak this a little bit more, and then we get to this point where, yeah, you know what? This is pretty much how it works. These are the primary activities. And so what we can do is we can open it up to a slightly larger community, the business stakeholders, just a moment, and we can have them comment on it. So we can say, okay, the small group, we've got a good consensus on what it is. Let's get more feedback from let's invite a few more people. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and invite that director we've been talking to about how inefficient this process is. And when I invite that person, I'm going to make them a contributor so they can't change our model, okay? So they don't mess it up. But they're going to be able to come in here, review it, and comment on it. And then we can build consensus across the organization about, do we have it right? Oh, you forgot something here. Oh, you need to change something there. Question? Yeah, we're heading there. Yep. So the question was, if we drill down into each one of these activities where we're trying to focus, right? So that people don't feel too overwhelmed about documenting the entire process. We're trying to slice and dice this so that you only have to think about one moving part at a time. Let's talk about the create offer letter activity. And then this activity, tell me everything you know about the problems and the details and any documents you might have that describe something about this activity. And then people can comment specifically about the activity. You can also work at the process level. And I'll show you in just a few moments about how you can see that in aggregate. For instance, right here, if you want to work in it in aggregate, we can switch from the discovery map view to the documentation view. And what this shows us is in more of a kind of a Word document format. It shows us all the activities in the process listed out. And for each one of these, I can edit the details about it. I can look at the detailed property sheets for it, and I can even look at comments for it. So in more of a sequential format, I can edit through the whole thing without having to traverse. I know I'm not there yet. I'm with you. So I'm getting closer, right? So this is one more level of comprehensiveness. This level of comprehensiveness lets me peruse all of the documentation of the process without having to drill down into each individual activity, okay? And in this format, we get a view of all of the details, including the documents and the comments, in kind of a more of a list format, so I don't have to drill down into each separate area. But there's an even better way than this. So we can do it individually. We can do it in aggregate. Let me show you two more levels of detail. So first of all, if we want to, if we're ready to talk about more detail related to the flow, okay, I get Bill, I get the value of doing the discovery map thing, right? We didn't get into analysis paralysis over the connections and the gateways and stuff, but we still want to do that, right? We still want to understand, what happens first, what happens second, and where the decision points are. And so we can transition, once we've done a reasonable job of documenting the activities and the milestones in the process, we can transition into a process diagram view. And in the process diagram view, what happened was for each of that one field, if you did nothing but fill out that one field that said participant, if that was the only thing you did, it automatically created swim lanes for each one of those roles that we typed in. And as a matter of fact, if I come into the discovery map, just to illustrate this, and add a new activity down here, let's go ahead and add a new activity. Let's call this the Chicago hiring session, Chicago brainstorm session. And in here, when we switch to the process diagram, we can see that it put that Chicago brainstorm session, it put that in an unassigned swim lane, because we didn't enter any information about that, right? So we could come into this activity and enter details about the activity if you're that kind of a property sheet person, right? Or we can just drag and drop this to a different swim lane. Like maybe this is an HR specialist activity, so we drag and drop it into the HR specialist activity. And when we edit it in the process diagram view, not only can we switch it between swim lanes and see the details documented in the property sheet, but if we change it here and say change it from the Chicago brainstorm session to Chicago brainstorm activity, we can see that when we go back to the discovery map, because sometimes it's nice to talk about it there, it's kept in sync. So whether I change it in the discovery map, kind of an ultimate business-friendly format, or the process diagram view, more detail about what's going on, it keeps everything in sync. And when I'm working with the view of this process, I have the ability to model the process as well. You can see here that I have a simple BPMN, business process modeling notation palette, that lets me work with activities and gateways and splits and timer events, and those things for those BPMN enthusiasts in the crowd are familiar. And for those that don't know anything about BPMN, certainly at least a couple of these shapes make sense, like maybe a decision gateway. We can add a decision gateway in here, and then maybe we know that there's an activity that we want to add right here. And we can name that activity whatever we want, right? So we have the ability to model in a free-form fashion but also in kind of a business safe fashion. You notice as I was adding and deleting things from the diagram, at no point did this diagram ever become disconnected. It has the ease of use of something like, for those of you that think drawing tools like Visio are easy, I know I've used them many times in the past, it has the ease of use of a typical drawing tool, but it's kind of business safe, right? Because I can't accidentally throw a bunch of stuff on the diagram and have it be all disconnected, right? So it's riding that kind of interesting line between making it easy and making it make sense, right? So, but there's a little bit more. There's two other levels that address the question that our friend in the front was asking about. How do we see everything without having to, hunt for it, if you will, right? So, yeah. So let me show you a couple things to make it more business consumable, and I think this will help answer your question. First of all, I can click on this PowerPoint button up at the top, or if I'm interested in more formats or more views of this process, I can go specifically to this process in my list of processes that I'm documenting, and I can export to a Word format. I can also export to Microsoft Excel. Oh, look at this. I can export to BPMN 2.0 and XPDL. This is not only a compelling and flexible place to start, BlueWorksLive.com, but it's a safe place to start because it's vendor agnostic. If you model your business processes in BlueWorksLive.com, you can take your work anywhere. As you're about to see in PowerPoint, Word, and Excel formats, but you can also take it to any business process management tool that understands the open standard, BPMN 2.0, right? So you're not held hostage or forced to keep using BlueWorks Live. Of course, we hope that you'll keep using it because it's really, it's best of breed. It's very innovative. But we don't force you to. We're forced to make it so great that you'll want to keep using it. So let me show you some of the formats. If you create a PowerPoint document, what it does in a couple of seconds is it creates a templated PowerPoint document. It makes all of these elements individual elements so that you can tweak them to your heart's content for any particular business meeting. And then any details that you entered in the property sheets get captured in a more PowerPoint kind of presentation, business meeting consumable fashion. Now, the format that I think makes it even more business consumable is the Microsoft Word format. So when I click on that, what that ends up giving me in a few seconds is a Word document. And in the Word document, we have listed out all of the activities throughout the process. And for each activity, let's say that we had some comments about the process or activities in the process, those are automatically converted to Microsoft Word review comments provided inline in the document. And then for anybody and this is a common use case, some of the people in our organization will embrace the opportunity to use something like BlueWorks Live, to use a web browser-based modeling tool to either author stuff or to review what the team has documented. Other people, and I alluded to this earlier, other people, no matter what you do, you can't get them a sign-on. What do you do with those people? Some of those people, you need their business sign-off, right? So what we can do is we can send them a picture of the process, a PowerPoint presentation that breaks down the process, a Word document that breaks down all of the documentation of the process. For those folks that have used BlueWorks Live, this format is familiar, so it's easy to digest. For those folks that haven't used BlueWorks Live, this format is logically organized and has all of the fidelity that the team put into the process, including things like those attachments and comments and problems that we captured, so that I can review this and sign off on it by sending somebody a Word document, as an example. Now, another format that is very business consumable is this Microsoft Excel format. And I think this one is a good one to highlight to balance things out a bit, because it balances out what we've seen so far as a lot of eye candy and graphical representation of the process into just the facts, Jack. Just give me the facts. I want to know. The team spent several hours or several days documenting the process. I want this consolidated in an easy to manipulate format so that I can analyze it. Maybe you've got some green belt or black belt Six Sigmas. Maybe you just have some business professionals that really understand the process and they want to understand the details. Well, so what we put in the spreadsheet format is all of the activities, all of the stakeholders, information, the participant, business owners, and so forth, the inputs, the outputs, the systems that are involved, the cycle times, the costs, the risks, the value adds. So now, through normal spreadsheet jockeying techniques, I can really analyze this information. Like, for instance, in this value add section, by normal spreadsheet jockeying techniques, I mean, you can simply say, show me this information in a navigable format. So I can say, I'm really interested of these 37 activities. Show me just the non-value added activities. Oh, here's a short list of just the non-value added activities. Maybe that is something that I can use to get a better feel for where I might want to focus. So for those folks that want to digest and leverage all this information, we give it to you in a no-nonsense format. So let's do the one last dimension of this, which is, and this is really kind of a summary format of all the work that you've put into this over the course of several hours or several days. So over the course of several hours or several days, we've captured information about the process as we've been highlighting, who does it, the inputs, the outputs, the problems, the documentation, people have commented about it. Oh yeah, one more thing. When people are collaborating on this, I can see who's on the account. So I can see currently online, I'm logged on to an IBM account where we have several hundred technical professionals around the world that use this IBM internal BlueWorks Live account. So this is just another account on BlueWorks Live, and some of my friends are on here, like Matt and Jonathan and Giovanni and Jeff. For these folks, I can chat with them online. So if I'm working on this and I see that, oh, Jeff's online, he was in the meeting last week, I want to ask him a question. I can say, hey Jeff, help me out with this process, okay? And then I can click this send a link to this page, and what'll show up, and I won't do this because Jeff doesn't know I'm online right now. But if I click the send, if I hit the enter key, he gets this instant message inside of BlueWorks Live. And if I click the send a link to this page, he would get a link in his chat session, and when he clicked on that link, it would bring him to this process on the account. Because in fact, on this account, we have many people doing many things across many processes, much like you would do in your company. I can see that, for instance, Josiane, I'm not even sure if that's how that name is pronounced, but Josiane has made 62 changes to the deal board process. Oh, I didn't realize they were starting up I didn't realize they spun up that deal board process yet. But looks like they're doing a lot of work, and I can see all the different things that Josiane has done. So this is my social networking dimension of BlueWorks Live that gives me a view of the activity on the team. Well, let's see. We had the meeting yesterday. Time is ticking. Time is money. I told folks we're going to reconvene in 5 days. I wonder if they've done anything. If that thing's blank, then you better start sending out some emails. Don't forget to do some work. We're reconvening in 4 days, right? Bill said that we've been doing this since 2007, and it's so easy to use that business people actually use it, and they put a lot of stuff in there. I don't want to be the exception to the rule, right? So you can get a feeling for the volume and velocity of activity and see what's going on across the team. Now, yes, question? Great question. Yeah, I was trying to decide when to introduce this part of it. So the question was, if different people make different edits and we want to manage versions of our work so that we don't accidentally step on other people's toes, how do we deal with that, right? How do we deal with change? So let's use that as an example here. Let's say that we had some bright ideas about this process and we added some new activities, and you can clearly see in the left column there that I've added a bunch of activities. And let's pretend for a moment that I put some very valuable information in those activities, right? So I spent some time making the choice of where they go and what they do. So I can come in here and click on this little snapshot icon, and I can give this a name, and of course it's up to me whether the name includes something like a version number, but I can say version 1.1 Chicago brainstorm work, and this was done by me. It'll actually tag it for my user ID. So version 1.2 brainstorm work, okay? And what happens is it adds that as a snapshot version in my revision history. So here's version 1.2 brainstorm work. Let's say that tomorrow or later today somebody comes in and, like you had described, they start, maybe they delete some things, maybe they they move these activities around, and maybe they have a legitimate reason for doing that, right? And maybe they add some more activities over here, so now I've got a long list of activities in the fourth column. And they say that this is version 1.3 or whatever you want to call it, Chicago brainstorm enhancements, right? And now, if I go in my revision history, I can see that I have version 1.3 Chicago brainstorm enhancements. I can see who did it, Bill Hahn. If I was logged on as a different user, of course, it'd be that different user's name. So now, if you come in tomorrow and to your dismay, you're like, what in the world happened to my business process? You can simply click on version 1.2, and boom, it's back to where you had it. And you can talk to that person about, well, what do you have in mind about version 1.3? Well, actually, what you're working on, this relates to another process we're doing, so I want to reuse your work. Oh, well, we have a way of templating it. We have a way of copying it. We have a way of duplicating it. We have a way of, you can break out things and say, all this stuff is a sub-process, so I want to build it out as a separate process, and that way we can work on things in a divide and conquer fashion so we're not stepping on each other's toes. But between now and when we discover how we want to segment and sub-process things and divide and conquer on our work, we can protect ourselves from the law of unintended consequences, right? We can just click that snapshot button and version our work over time, and that way we don't lose anything. We can't lose anything because we're able to version our work. Now, also when we're working with people on these processes, we can collaborate. And I'll just give you a quick example here of, this is an example where on the top half of my screen, I have Bill Hahn, that's me, working here in Chicago. And on the bottom half of my screen, I have Ray, and he might be working in New York, in some other city, in some other state. And you can see that when Ray moves an activity on the discovery map, in a near real-time fashion, Bill sees it move. If Bill goes and edits something, let's say we'll change the name of this activity from notify to something else. As soon as he changes it, you can see down here that when he's done editing it, and he either tabs away from that, or as soon as he leaves it, you can see Ray sees the changes down below. So the point being that 2 or more people, however many people are logged on to your BlueWorks Live account, they can see who's there. They can not only see who's there, but they can chat with them. They can ask them to join where they're working and see exactly what they're working on. And no matter who makes changes to the process diagram, everyone sees the changes immediately. So true, collaboration, I guess you could say. And we have the snapshot, so we can do this in a risk-free fashion. So you know what? Hey, I've got this could be interesting. We got 5 of us looking at this diagram. People start getting carried away. It might, a supposedly bright idea might turn into a train wreck. And it's like, I want it to be a train wreck, so let me snapshot it, so that way if it turns out we don't like what we did, we just go right back to where we were, right? Question? Yeah, so you can, that's what we did here. We copied an activity or set of activities into a new process. And this is where we copy the activities into a new process called HR Hiring Orientation CD. And so we took those out of the main process and put them into a new process. And you can see whenever you're editing or looking at a sub-process that's used by other processes, it advertises that this process is used in other processes or linked from here. So if I was using this sub-process in 3 or 4 different sub-processes, I get a list of where I'm using it. So I have visibility on what other processes are dependent upon me. Yes. So that way we can really divide and conquer our work and segment it appropriately. And as I mentioned, when we're working on this, the modeling journey scales, and by scales I mean that we can have many levels of detail, right? We have many levels of detail in the discovery map, and we also have multiple levels of detail in the process diagram. So that, for instance, here, well, this is a sub-process level of detail, so I can either show it or hide it, or decide that this is not just a sub-process that I want to document along with this this process flow. As we mentioned before, we can actually reference other processes like we're doing here, and thereby segment the work and break it out. So the last thing I need to show you so that you have an understanding of the full range of possibilities is this analyze view. This is something that's really easy to miss, right? So if you go and sign up for a 30-day free evaluation, you could probably do pretty much everything I just showed you just by using mouse aerobics, because it's pretty easy. And then if you know about the snapshot, you can get really aggressive with your experimentation, because you can version stuff and then go crazy and get yourself out of a jam just by going down to this revision history area down here and clicking on a previous snapshot to go back where you were when it looked better, right? This is really easy to miss. So for anybody that's sleeping, wake up, right? The Analyze icon, when I click on that, what it does is it switches to an Analyze view where it'll take all that information that we entered in the process. This is a nice way to get to all that information quickly, and it provides visual layers, kind of like Google Maps gives you layers of information visually on top of a map of the world. I can look at the cycle time, and I can see the hot spots of latency in my process. I can see that this milestone of activities takes 4 days. This activity takes 2 hours, 1 day, 2 days, 1 hour. Wow, 2 days. I had no idea that this took 2 days. What's up with that? I can see that layered on top of a process diagram as well. So whether I'm switching between the discovery map or process diagram, I get these layers of information. Maybe I'm interested in the cost. What are my cost centers in this process? You can see all that information layered on top of the activities in the process. I can see that these two sets of activities represent a fair amount of cost in my process with those little gold labels. So what about the value add? I can see this collection of activities is value add. Oh, I want to invest in making those collection of activities more efficient. Maybe it would be worth my money and time and effort to make these more efficient. Maybe these are value add, typically value add activities tied to either back-end efficiency, back-office efficiency, or customer sat, front-facing things. Might be a good place to invest. What about these non-value added activities? Let's cut costs, because it's not adding value. Maybe it's compliance. I don't know what it is, but we better get it done with the least amount of time and cost as possible, because it's not adding value to what the business stakeholders are saying about this process. What about my problems? If this is a process I'm documenting because people are saying, oh my gosh, this process is broken. We've got 3 people, John, Mary, and Judy. And if John, Mary, and Judy left the company tomorrow, we would be in bad shape, because they got 3 heroes that are holding together this process with a lick and a promise and some duct tape. I mean, and that's very common, right? There's always usually some of those processes where group heroics are making it work, right? So in that type of a situation where we're documenting a processes because we have problems and pain in the organization, we would be really interested in the heat map of problems. Oh, okay. Well, I've got some activities that don't seem to have any profound problems, but some of these have, like, for instance, 3 problems, right? And we get a quick view of what are the problems the team says we have, the challenges that the team says we have with this process. So with the combination of this analysis mode, what about systems? Maybe this is an initiative where we're trying to do some automation and automate and streamline this process. Well, there's some, it looks like there's a concentration here in the middle of the process of some system dependencies. This is where we might want to partner with IT and make sure that we're doing that as well as we could, right? So the combination of this analysis view and the documents that we can create to share with business can help us not only build a consensus, but then prioritize whether this process is a good candidate or an important, high-ranking, high-priority candidate for applying BPM to, right? So if we decide that based on what we've documented here that this needs BPM, I mean, we need better visibility, we need better control, we need better efficiency, we need better manageability of this process, then how do we take this from a process model to execution? One way that we could do that is, let's say that this is a relatively simple process, and we want to, instead of using emails and paper that we send around between people, there's some processes that the process essentially consists of. It's an important process, but it's a bunch of people sending emails back and forth for approvals and sign off and what happens next. We just want better visibility on who acts next and when do they need to get it done by, so that we can go and look at that process at any given time instead of calling somebody or looking at an email trail, right? So for simple processes like that, we can use the button below blueprint a process. We just blueprinted a process, right? We can automate a process through some simple process automation and say, this is really just a simple workflow, and this simple workflow, let's say it's a new marketing promotion workflow. Maybe it's a simple workflow or a checklist of items, because today the way we do it is there's a bunch of emails flying around. So what we can do is we can, in BlueWorks Live, do just a simple workflow or checklist of activities that say, for marketing promotion, we need a promotion name, promotion details, and there's several primary tasks. So for instance, there's approved marketing promotion task, and by default, Cliff Vars is a person that needs to work on that. Let's look at our list of users that are on our team on BlueWorks Live and choose who's involved in the creative process and marketing promotions. Chaz, he's in charge of marketing. And then, what about the finance approval? Okay, that's Damien. He's in charge of the financial approval. So I can build a simple template that I can share with people that want to do a better job of doing, just simple process tracking and automation. Instead of just email, now somebody can log on and they see advertised here that there's a new marketing promotion template to, instead of just doing email, to step through the steps of a process. So we're talking baby steps, right? What if I'm not ready for the big BPM platform you're about to see? Okay, what if I want to do baby steps in BlueWorks Live? I can say, okay, here's a new promotion, triple play and save. There's a document that I can attach that describes it. And I can use this template. Now I can attach dates for this specific marketing promotion. Let's put some dates in here that these are going to be due by. And oh, by the way, there's a high budget finance approval might be needed. And the person in charge of that is Phil Gill. He's the buck steps here guy. So we'll make these 3-4 steps approval steps. This one just has to get done by a certain time, but these are approval steps that we can't proceed unless we get approval. So again, just simple process automation. So now let's go on and see when user receives a notification that this process needs to be worked on. Well, Cliff gets an email that lets him log on. It says, hey, you need to do something about this. So now the process is actually running, and Cliff sees the details of the process, and then he has an opportunity to either accept, approve, or reject the step that he's involved in. So now, instead of Cliff sending and receiving emails, I can go to this dashboard, if you will, and have people come to a common place and add comments about what they're doing in the process. Okay, I'll approve this promotion, but only if over under 100K. And now, once he's approved it, Chaz is going to get an email, the next person in line, and Damien's going to get an email that says, hey, you know what, you've got some work to do by a certain date. But before Cliff leaves, he's going to actually delegate the approval of this step to himself, because he said, he'll do it under a certain threshold. So now, instead of emails flowing around, now people log on to this common place and they can see, just like we saw the social networking spirited collection of activity for documenting processes, we can see the social networking activity around working on simple processes, right? So we can leverage this this view of activity across the team to see who's doing what. So Jason added a comment to a particular process that's in flight. Now, so the idea is that in BlueWorks Live, we can do really ultra simple, lightweight, I got to get a little bit better control over this email-only workflow and take a baby step in terms of managing the due dates and the progression of that process. But let's take a look at real business process implementation, real modeling for execution for the business process. So first of all, how do we get the work that we did on BlueWorks Live into our BPM platform? The way that we do that is, it looks like the following. We can go into our modeling for execution environment, which I'll walk you through in a few minutes. And in here we have a special category in this desktop tool, which is called the Process Designer. You'll remember Neil referred to it as the Process Designer. In the Process Designer, we have a special category called Blueprints, and when we click on that, what it does is it allows you to subscribe to any blueprints that you created on BlueWorks Live, and you use your same user ID and password that you use to log on to BlueWorks Live. And what that does is it gives you a list of all the processes on BlueWorks Live. So if I go down here to the Bill Hahn collection of processes, here are my Bill Hahn processes, and I check the checkbox next to a given process. When I click the next button, it'll show me how many processes are included in that. You know, if I click one process, and like someone was asking earlier, can I divide and conquer on process documentation, and can I have multiple processes that reference other processes? Just by clicking one checkbox, it'll pull in all the processes and sub-processes that are referenced by that primary process model. And what happens is then it brings it into my modeling for execution environment, my BPM platform, and in here, then we can further model the process to make specific decisions about, well, how is this going to run? I mean, I have lots of information about the process from a modeling for documentation standpoint, okay, but how do I make decisions about which path I take in the process with, you know, logical evaluations of, is this approved, is it not approved? I can, quote unquote, model for execution to make this process runnable, okay? So what happens if we make this process runnable? Let me take you on a three-part tour in the time we have left together. This three-part tour essentially shows you how you can take that model that we did in BlueWorks Live and add a little bit more information to it to make it runnable. To use it, just a moment, to use it as an end-user community of individual participants, managers, and executives, and then analyze that business process for continuous process improvement. So the trifecta, if you will, is the design and implementation, the end-user experience, and the analysis and optimization. And when we're doing that, we actually use a common business process model, a shared model, that picture that Neil talked to about how we have this shared repository called a process center. What the value of that, like, why do I care? So what, right? The so what is that I can use a single set of tools, a single platform, a single way to get at this single version of the truth, the process model, whether I'm designing it and implementing it at design time, using it as an end user community, or analyzing it for optimization. And that will make a whole lot more sense after you actually see it in action. So there's a question back there? Yeah, so the question was, as you go through that cycle, can you import the model back into BlueWorks Live? So back in 2007, 2008 timeframe, we actually enabled that. What we found was that customers didn't use it much because when you model for the process for execution, you're adding details to the process model that are a much lower level of detail. And when you push that back up to BlueWorks Live, you end up kind of polluting the business view of the business process because you have so many more details. So the practical answer is you don't want to do that, right? The evolutionary answer is we've done that with many other modeling products in the past. Now that we've taken Lombardi from a 200-person company to a part of IBM that has a much larger development budget, is that something that we're looking at doing, some version of that where you might push it back up to BlueWorks Live and update the model slightly? Pragmatically speaking, what businesses have done over the last several years with BlueWorks Live and the BPM implementation platform is when they model it for execution, there's a handful of things, usually measured in a single-digit number of things that need to be changed up in the BlueWorks model to keep it at the business level of clarity, right? So practically speaking, it's not an issue. Operationally, is that like in an ideal world, would it be great to be able to just push it back up there? Yeah, and we're working on some of that. But practically speaking, it's not needed. So if you want to talk about that afterwards, we can talk about it more. So how do we take the business process and make it a runnable application? So I'm going to take you on this three-part tour by looking at the end-user experience first, showing you how we can analyze and optimize the process, and then lastly showing you a little bit of the behind the scenes on how it was built, how we took that process model and made it runnable, if you will. So first of all, when I use the business process, we can use it from an end-user interface, and the out-of-the-box end-user interface is a lightweight web interface called the Process Portal. It's not actually an enterprise portal or a general purpose portal. It's a lightweight web application that's called Process Portal that works with any business process that you build. So part of the way that we get from nothing to a production level application in the average 90 days is that one of the options you have for using your business process is this out-of-the-box portal, this out-of-the-box web interface that works with any process that you build. So let me show you a little bit about what it gives you. When you participate in the process, I see my performance as I'm participating in the process. I can see a list of the activities that are awaiting my attention when I use the process. And if I look at, let me pull up this process in the design environment so you can see what it looks like. In this example process, I took this process from BlueWorks Live and then I added a little bit of detail to it to make it runnable. The little bit of detail that I added to it includes things like the user interface for the activities. We have the yellow boxes, which are user interfaces, and the gray boxes, which are things that happen before and after a user sees a user interface, like getting the request number, getting the product information. Then a user looks at a screen, and when they're done reviewing the details for that, it goes ahead and gets available vendors and then provides a user interface to select vendors. When we're building those screens, we can, as you'll see a little bit later, just drag and drop those UIs together. And when we do so, we make it very easy to build the user interface in front of and in collaboration with the business stakeholders and the IT folks in the room. So what you end up seeing is that you can build out the implementation of the process, the UI of the process, and the data of the process. We can see the data that flows through the process is listed out. We're able to capture this data in a real live design session just by typing it in, having a business conversation with the business stakeholders about what is the data that goes through this process, or looking at that the data that we documented in the BlueWorks Live process and pulling that in here. Or from an IT standpoint, we can point and click at back-end systems and it'll pull in this data from back-end systems. So it's very easy and quick to get the process from BlueWorks Live, to get the data from wherever it's defined in people's heads or in back-end systems, and to build out the user interface. In this process, in this order fulfillment process, we have swim lanes. Those came right over from BlueWorks Live. We didn't have to, redraw those. The analyst swim lane here, analysts can create orders. We can also sense a low inventory situation, and SAP might kick off this order fulfillment process. So when we make a process runnable, when we take a process from BlueWorks Live and we pull it into this process designer and make it runnable, we can start this process as either a person or from anything in the IT landscape, right? We can expose it as web services and as messaging interfaces, as all the open standards, usual suspects. So I can start it as a person, or I can expose the process to be started from a system. In this process, a vendor, we farm out to vendors, multiple vendors, the request for quote. So we're going to ask for multiple quotes from multiple vendors. And then in the system lane here, we're going to make some fulfillment rules, some business rules about how the order gets fulfilled. And then an analyst is going to go ahead and make a recommendation, choose from the vendors that responded which one should be used to fulfill the order. And a manager gets final sign-off on whether that vendor is going to be used to fulfill that order. And if all goes well on the happy path, we're going to complete the order and log it in the back end. If the manager doesn't approve the order, they're going to send it back for rework, right? So that's kind of how the process works. When people participate in the process, whether they're an individual participant or one of those other roles in the process, they get a list of activities. This list, this to-do list or this activity list, this task list, this can be pushed into your old Visual Basic application in the call center, or in your custom web app, or let's say you have a SharePoint site, or you have an Outlook email client. We can push this task list into all of those places, so you don't have to use the out-of-the-box web interface. This is just one of the ways to get to it. And whenever you get to that task list, you can easily see by clicking on this icon up here that looks like a picture of a process, you can see the picture of the process. And an interesting thing happens here. When we look at the picture of the process, the participants that are working on the process, they see the same picture of the process that we see in the process designer. So that single shared model, right? This business process model, we're sharing it across design time and run time, and as you'll see, analysis time. So a little evidence of that is here's the process in the process designer environment where I'm designing the process. Here's the process in the end user environment when I'm participating in the process. I select an activity awaiting my attention. I say, show me a picture of the process. Now when an end user uses it, they actually see where they are in the process. Like this particular user sees that it's waiting for my approval in the manager in the manager approval step. And they can see the due dates of when it's due, right? So a single picture of the process across design time and run time. Now when I drill down into that activity and claim it, I can also see while I'm working on that activity where I am in the process. So again, you get clarity on where I am in the process. If I'd like to see who's worked on that process, what happened before it got to me, right? I can see the order was created, vendors bidded for the business, fulfillment rules were selected, an analyst recommended this to me. I can see who did the work, the analyst, the vendors, and now it's awaiting my attention so I can go ahead and claim this activity and work on it. And when I claim an activity and work on it, I can see those user interfaces that we dragged and dropped together in the process designer. So the end user interface that we use can include not only the data that I need to look at to perform the activity and the data that I need to enter to perform the activity, and this is really a very simple user interface. It's very common for the UIs to be much more sophisticated. Depending upon what you need to do, they can be either simple or complex. And through simple mouse aerobics, we can include live reports in the user interface. So in this case, you can see quotes accepted versus quotes in flight and which vendors represent a higher or lower volume of quotes. So you get the idea that end users they have good visibility into where they are in the process, and when they participate in the process, they're coached through on what they need to do to get the job done. Now, what about choosing what to do next? For any process that you take from modeling to execution, we automatically track the work that's being done in the process. So for instance, in this process, when I either drag and drop a activity into the diagram, or I just use one of the activities that was populated for me because I worked on it in BlueWorks Live, you can see that this is much more than just a picture of the process. In fact, it's actually a runnable process, if you will. The mere act of dragging and dropping a shape into this process or importing this process from BlueWorks Live makes it runnable. What I mean by that is that this activity, through just configuring the property sheet, I can choose how this process will run. So for instance, I can see the due date for any activity that I pull in from BlueWorks Live or I draw onto this process in the process designer has a default due date of 1 hour. And I can change that to hours, minutes, or days. In fact, I can actually choose the process data by clicking on this little data chooser, this variable chooser. I can choose from all of the process data that's flowing through this process what to base this due date off of. Maybe if this is a gold or platinum customer, I want to make that due date something dynamic. Maybe this is a particularly large order. For this specific order that's flowing through this process, I want to make this order higher priority, right? So you can configure without coding the behavior of how the process will run, including dynamic behavior like that. What about things like, right, how are we going to decide who gets the work and how they get it? Well, in the routing tab here, we can see that, like for instance, for this new activity, let's say we have 100 people on our team, okay? And I'm sorry, we have 10 people on our team and we have 100 orders flowing through this process. Well, each person on my 10-person team is going to get 100 things in their inbox. Let's think about how we might organize that a little bit better. One example here is that If I go into this user distribution, I can switch it from the default to something like load balancing or round robin. So through these simple yet sophisticated algorithms, I can balance the work across my team so that now each person on my 10-person team has 10 items in their inbox. What if Bob the vendor is working on this order, and when it gets to this step later in the process, this step that happens later in the process, I want to make sure that Bob works on that same order because Bob's already familiar with the customer and the order. Well, what I can do is I can switch this from lane participant to last user in lane, and now when this order progresses through the process down to this activity, it's going to end up back in Bob's inbox, right? So I can't teach you everything about the way the process designer works. What I'm trying to do here is show you a few of the things so you get the spirit that when you're using this to model a process with more detail for how it's going to execute, you can not only model it like we did in BlueWorks Live, where I'm drawing the picture of the process and so forth, but you can configure without having to code the behavior of how the process is going to run at execution. Because I'm able to enter in some of those details, like for instance the due dates, whether they're dynamic or not, then it makes complete sense that we're able to calculate for you the percentage of activities that are on track, at risk, and overdue. It knows how many of my activities are overdue. I mean, it's, the process is running. It has a clock and a date. It just calculates it. This at-risk pie segment, it learns over time. The IBM BPM platform learns over time based on your work and the work that the team is doing, the likelihood that an activity, a task that sits in your inbox that hasn't been claimed for a while, compared to the due date and how fast we tend to get things done, the percentage of your work that's going to be at risk. If it sits in your inbox for more than 4 hours, statistically speaking, it's likely going to go overdue because most of the time you don't grab it within the first 4 hours, it goes overdue, so it's going to categorize those activities as at risk. So now I have a better way of choosing what to do next. Instead of just getting an inbox, which for some people might be fine, I just go through it one at a time. I might want to more, let's say, in a smart fashion, choose what to do next. Choose for my color-coded inbox what to do next. Maybe I want to work on my overdue items. As a manager of this team, the manager can get a similar view of the people and their work across the team. I can see when the work is going to go overdue, so I can proactively get a feeling for the amount of my activities and work that is going to go overdue. I can see not only my performance compared to the rest of the team, but I can see the work distribution across the team, so I get a better feeling for who has more or less work. So then I could, for instance, come to some of these overdue activities, and I could choose to, with these buttons, change the priority, or maybe reassign the work to somebody else on the team. So I have a way of managing the work across my team because I can see who's working on it and which group of people on the team are responsible for claiming those activities and working them. So I get a really good bird's eye view of what's going on in my process. Now, all of those reports are out of the box and work with, actually there's one more report, a process report. Let's say I want to see not only the work of my team, but I want to see the work across the entire process, maybe from a management or executive point of view. I can see all of the work flowing through this process, the completed orders as well as the orders in flight, and trending information about how that looks over the course of weeks or months. I can also get a feeling for my highest volume and velocity activities. Like, for instance, manager approval and get vendor responses. They represent my highest volume of activities here. And if I drill down on, for instance, manager approval, I can see all of the on-track manager approvals that are currently in flight, as well as the at-risk and the overdue ones, right? So all of these, we know as a BPM vendor that you're going to want these kinds of reports to manage the work that's flowing through the process. What about process-specific reports? What if I have some reports that are truly specific to the data that's flowing through my process? What I can do is I can click on business data. So here I have product description, quantity, vendor, price, customer. This is business data that's specific to this order fulfillment process. Where did it come from? In the process, if I switch from the diagram view to the variables view, I can see in this process that some of these data elements are not tracked for performance tracking, and some of them are. So for instance, status and total quantity and customer, I have this checkbox checked for performance tracking. So pay close attention to this. With zero coding, and just by checking a checkbox, I can make the list of business data longer or shorter for business stakeholders that want specific reports. Six Sigma and Lean over the last 2 decades have done exhaustive studies, and what they found is that if you do nothing to improve the performance, if you do nothing to automate a process, nothing to change a process, if you do nothing but measure a process and share those measurements with the participants in a process, you can get double-digit productivity improvements. Do we do automation? Absolutely. Do we do rules? Absolutely. Do we do things to improve the process? Absolutely. But let's do some humble things and just maybe move up 1 Sigma level and get double-digit returns on investment with out-of-the-box capabilities to give you visibility that result in improving success, right? And to that end, with very little effort, just by checking a checkbox, I can make this list of business data longer or shorter. So what can I do with that business data? I can come in here and say, I'm interested in the amount of orders based on customers. So let me look at the total quantity of orders organized by customer, and let me choose the a pie chart. Look at that. So now I can see a customized report that shows me the customer distribution based on quantity of orders. So I can see Target, Walmart, Best Buy, and Costco represent huge pieces of the pie for my orders. Maybe I want to change the view of that chart to something like a bar chart so I can more clearly see who represents the largest number of orders. Here you can see Best Buy has a higher total quantity of orders than any other customer. These ad hoc reports, we can create these at design time in anticipation of end users wanting these kinds of process-specific reports. But I can't possibly imagine everything the business community is going to want. So the business users, after the process goes into production and is being used by business stakeholders, they can create their own reports, and they're created the same way with simple mouse aerobics. So to wrap this up, we can see that we can create these reports either at design time or at end user runtime, and we can have reports like, for instance, organized by supplier. The red bar is missed service level agreements when the suppliers are taking too long to turn around their quotes. I can see based on customer, Walmart, Target, and so forth, the percentage of the time that I'm taking too long to service those customers. I can see response time by product. Maybe some of these products are constrained or really popular. And then finally, here's some of my most important activities, highest volume activities in the process. And I can see this manager approval bar is the biggest, baddest bar in this chart. Manager approval is taking a really long time. What can I do about that? Well, I can go back to that same tool, that same process designer that I used to take the BlueWorks Live process and make it runnable by doing some work on the property sheets, by dragging and dropping some UIs together. Again, when you use this environment, there's a run button, if you will. When I use this run button, when I use this run button, you can see that I'm able to. Let me just fast forward ahead here a little bit to where we've got a new activity down here in the bottom left. And this new activity down here in the bottom left, I want this new activity to be done before the create order. Okay. The rule of thumb is when I'm doing this with an end user community, let's go to like workshop number 2, where the businesses decide I want to take that BlueWorks Live process and I want to actually make it a runnable process. Let's do another half-day or full-day workshop. The rule of thumb is it's so easy to run this and get feedback from the business that if you don't run it before lunch on the first day, you're doing it wrong, right? And so I just want to make sure you understand kind of the essence of that, if you will. The business tells me that sometimes create order is the first activity in the process done by analysts, but other times the manager is the first one that does it. So when I come up here and press the play button, we can see that it actually runs the process in this kind of workshop prototyping mode. In the tool, it runs the process for real because the BPMN engine of the BPM platform makes it always runnable. This is always runnable. We don't have to generate code and wait for that to be deployed. It's always runnable. And so when I press that play or run button, it allows me to run through and step through this process. And you can see this first activity, I don't have a user interface for it yet. I just dragged and dropped it onto the diagram. I haven't implemented it yet, if you will. So I get a default UI that says, hey, you're in the new first activity in the order fulfillment process. The point of this technical demo snippet is to show you that even if I've done nothing other than draw a new activity on the process diagram, it's still runnable, right? It's still ready to run. And what I can do more importantly is I can come into this new first activity and I can actually build it out based on the data that's flowing through the process. I can use this, what's called an activity wizard, and I can actually get a jump start on implementing this, making it runnable, so that within the first hour of a workshop with the business stakeholders that care about this process being built right, I can, with a couple of clicks here, I can go in, and what it's done is it's built a UI for me. Now, what are the business users going to say? Oh, it's pretty boring. At least it has our data on it. And oh, by the way, when I run this screen, this data really shows me the data that's flowing through the process. And when I type stuff into the screen, it really updates the process. But that's not how I want it to look. I mean, I really want it to look like a two-column layout. So let me go ahead in here and switch this from one column to two column, okay? And then just use mouse aerobics to drag and drop things between the screens. And then when the business says, yeah, that looks about how I like it, then a few seconds later you press that run button in the upper right-hand corner, you press that run button again, and now when I run it, it looks different. It's always runnable, whether I'm working on an individual activity or I'm working up the process. And what that is it's kind of an inflection point that happens in the afternoon of day one or the morning of day two when you're either working in a workshop, you're working on a POC, maybe you're working on a funded project. By the end of day one, beginning of day two, this inflection point is the point at which they believe you. They get it. Oh, what you said about being able to roll something out in 90 days and have it actually be usable, and what we want, you actually meant that, right? The first time you run that process, they're going to say things like, oh, okay, well, I know we said that the UI screen should look like that because we gave you some screen mock-ups, or I know we said the data, that was the data, or I know we said that was the first activity in the process, but now that we see it running, what we really meant was, right, the value of playing it back, of actually running it and stepping through it with the business and IT stakeholders understand the process is that they say, oh, that's what a business process looks like. Okay, what we really meant was you get this early course correction, and then when they realize that you can actually change it and run it in an iterative fashion, they say, oh, that long list of requirements that we normally have to force into V1 because we don't think there's ever going to be a V2, right? It usually takes a lot of time, a lot of money, and an act of God to come out with V2, right? There won't be a V2. We want everything in V1. They say, oh, well, this is more iterative. This is different than what we're used to. We'll take that list of requirements. We'll shrink it down to just the highest priority items we want in that first 90 to 120-day release, right? It's scope management. It lets them, by bringing it to life, it lets them participate in prioritizing what's really the most important thing to get done in that first iteration. So the last little part of this is that once I actually use the process, I can look at all of the usage. We automatically track how the process runs, so we can slice and dice an analysis of the process for process improvement. We can look at last month versus this month. Maybe we changed the process and we want to see did we help it or hurt it. Maybe we just want to do general purpose process analysis and look at the trends and hotspots in the process. So like I previewed before our halfway point in this session, we can get a hotspot that shows, you know what, sure enough, there's a dark red line or a manager approval. That management report said the manager's taken a long time to approve this process, these orders. On average, it's taken them 13 hours and 55 minutes to approve orders. But you know what? They're not the only culprits because the analysts on average take 16 hours and some change to make the fulfillment recommendation, right? So on the surface, it looks like the analysts are the bigger problem, 16 hours versus 13 hours. Well, there's a lot of other data that the platform's automatically tracking for us. Let's look at the percent of instances outside range. In other words, when things are taking longer than the business thinks it should. We have a conversation with the business with BlueWorks Live, document the process. We prioritize that process with the business and they say, yeah, we want this one to run. So then we fill out a few more property sheets. Tell me how long you think it's going to take. We think this should take, less than a day. This should take less than 6 hours. The system knows how long it should take. So what we do is we calculate for you the percent of time that it's taking longer than the business says it should. 38% of the time the analysts are taking too long. Managers are taking too long 40% of the time. It's actually a little bit bigger problem. And when I go through here and look at the work that flows through this process, we're automatically tracking all this information for you so we can see all of the orders that flowed through the process and went into manager approval. We can see just by clicking on a line here all of the details about the products, priority, quantity, vendor, price. And you can see this is for all the customers and whether they were accepted or rejected. What about the 32% of the time they're rejected? When I click on that line, I see only the data for the orders that was rejected. So let's say I've got some business experts or process experts on the team, and I want to put this data in their hands. I can click on this Excel spreadsheet icon, and what that'll do for us is it'll give them in a spreadsheet format all of that process data about how the process was really used, and they can go in and say, oh, well, we heard that there were some issues with certain vendors that work on this process. So, what we can do is we can slice and dice and spot patterns. So we can put this data in the hands of process experts to spot patterns of when managers approve versus reject. What if we could identify, if we know a manager is going to reject an order anyway under a certain set of circumstances, why let it sit in their inbox for several days and then pay them a lot of money to make the decision to evaluate it if they're going to reject it anyway? So process experts or BPM experts, analysts could use this spreadsheet information to slice and dice it very effectively. In addition, the platform can spot those patterns for us. So as I'm wrapping up here, I'll spend one more minute on this and then we'll close. You can see here that if I know, in this case, the business data that holds the accept or reject decision is called the status variable. So the process data called status holds the accept or reject condition. And the platform can then spot all of these situations where, when it's a certain combination of price, customer, and product, it's going to 82% of the time accept it or reject it. And the system, the platform, IBM BPM platform, can make process rule suggestions for us and say, well, 80% of the time managers reject it when it's a certain combination of product, priority, and price. And so then the punchline here becomes when I click finish, what we'll see is that the diagram actually changes. It'll, in a risk-free fashion, because we have the same snapshot capability in the process designers we do on BlueWorks Live, we can, in a risk-free fashion, experiment with these process optimization suggestions. We can see in here that it added a bypass gateway. So when a manager needs to touch this order and actually evaluate it, it'll forward it to them. But if we can identify certain combination of conditions where the manager is going to accept it or reject it anyway, we'll follow down this path and either auto-accept it or auto-reject it. So what are those rules that were created for us that will auto-accept it or auto-reject it? It's a bypass rule that can either be a full-blown business rule like an iLog JRules business rule, or a simple business rule decision table that says, each row of this table is a certain set of, or a combination of customer, product description, price, and priority. And so for a certain combination of values, I'm going to automatically approve it, and for a different situation, I'll automatically reject it. So throughout this whole cycle of working with the process, we've been able to use a single version of the process. When we model it and design it and run it with the business, it's always immediately runnable, so we can do it multiple times a day. Like in Chicago, we vote early and often. With processes, you want to run it early and often to get that early course correction from the business and the laser focus on what are the priorities for this process for the business. When people use it, they get they get reports and insight and manageability, and when we analyze how it ran, we get all the information both graphically and textually to analyze and optimize the process and go through this continuous loop of improvement. So that's the that's the tour of BPM in action, to give you a feeling for how it works. How do you bring it to life? One of the next steps that you might consider and is being pushed onto and made available on bpminstitute.com. I'm hopeful that we're going to get this up on bpminstitute.com. Greg and I talked about this. It seems to make a lot of sense. What we launched last month on IBM.com is a sandbox environment for IBM BPM. So if you have 5 minutes or less, you can come to the bpmsandbox.com, and on bpmsandbox.com you can get everything I did today plus more in the form of live recorded, narrated tutorial demos. So the things that we did for BlueWorks Live and IBM BPM, you can go to bpmsandbox.com and you can get access to this as YouTube demos. So people that that didn't attend this session, you can say go to bpmsandbox.com and you can get a little bit of a taste. And then if they're intrigued and they want to learn actually how to do it, if you watch the videos for a longer period of time, they show you exactly how to use the BlueWorks Live and IBM BPM tools to bring BPM to life. So that's a really kind of progressive disclosure way of taking the next step. And if you want to take it for a test drive, at the top, towards the top of this this IBM.com wiki, there's a link here that says online trial. And when you click on that, it takes you to an online sandbox environment in the cloud where you can actually drive this. From your laptop or desktop, it does a remote control. So even if you don't have very much memory or CPU on your computer, remote controls our cloud-based environment, so you can take it for a test drive. So this is really kind of a turnkey way of taking the next step to accomplish the vision of what Neil painted the picture of, use the tools in the way that I demoed it, and refresh your memory by watching the YouTube demos. And if you have somebody on your team that actually wants to kick the tires to make sure it's not too good to be true, they can test drive it at bpmsandbox.com. So with that, I think I'm completed. We're a few minutes over, so I appreciate everybody's interest and endurance. And Greg, maybe you want to wrap it up.
All right, well, I just wanted to thank the folks from IBM for hosting and helping to bring this education out to members of our community. So if we get a nice round of applause for the guys today, they did a good job. And we're good to go. You don't have to fret about lunch. It's still available and right out the door and around the corner. And this afternoon,